Yeah, FOP or Fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, the long name, is an ultra-rare genetic disorder characterized by abnormal development of bone in areas of the body where bone is not normally present, like in your joints, ligaments, tendons, cartilage, and muscle. When the body undergoes normal wear and tear or trauma, such as a broken bone, ligament, tendon, and cartilage cells default into making bone versus repairing those micro tears and trauma. And eventually the individual actually becomes encased in a larger skeleton. Yeah, the progress has actually been tremendous. So finding the single root cause of a genetic disorder often in the research community results in really a burst of activity because you now have something to focus on, especially like a drug target. FOP is no exception. So 16 years prior to the discovery, there were about 30 peer-reviewed journal articles per year. And now that in the 16 years after, that number has doubled. Prior to the discovery, the articles were more about case reports when patients would be found and described, and then there would be a characterization of the progression of their disease. But there wasn't a lot of mechanistic action or proof of concept or drug targeting in that region because we didn't know what to target. So once we had genetic discovery, the literature burst open and activity has burst open. There's been quite a bit of activity. I think that one of the questions that you may be wondering is whether or not there are clinical trials or treatments underway. At this point, there are 6 pharmaceutical-sponsored registered trials ranging from phase 1 in healthy human subjects through phase 3 and getting closer and closer to approval. 3 other pharmaceutical companies have programs in preclinical development. And we're even fortunate to have investigators and scientists that are so dedicated, they have created their own registered trial and are pursuing a drug in that manner. So there's an incredible amount of activity. And recently, in this past year, there has been an approved medication in Canada only.
So the organization was founded back in 1988. And when it was founded by a group of patients, just more as a pen pal organization. They were facing a disease with few diagnosed people. So no one lived in their community that had the same disease as them, but they had this disease of progressive disability. So they just wanted to speak to one another about, how do you bathe? Do you have a career? Do you have romantic relationships? How are you doing life? And then within the next 2 years, a father of a child with the disease said, I'm going to hold a golf tournament. And that is how the idea of the IFOPA involved in funding research and supporting research was started. He raised $30,000 back in 1990 in Boston at a golf tournament, and that funded the first ever research grants for FOP. And that's evolved over time. And so now we're an organization that still supports families. We have programs that support families from just when they're Googling to find out if their child might have this ultra rare disease to they've just been diagnosed to end of life decision making. We support, we provide programs that help with kind of the physical manifestations of the disease, but we also do a lot around mental health, just both for the patient, but then also for the caregivers that support them throughout their lifetime. And then we also do fund a variety of research programs. We partner with both academic researchers and pharmaceutical researchers and clinicians to support everything from grant funding to an open access mouse model and biobank. We have a registry, we have a daily symptom tracker. We partner with groups that are beginning to formulate clinical trials, and we talk to them about the protocol and how what they're developing might be, how that works for patients or how it doesn't work for patients, so that the patient voice is always front and center. We develop patient advisory boards, we conduct surveys. So we really want to be that glue between the two that makes sure that that when trials come out, that patients are aware of what their opportunities are, but then also that as trials are being developed, that they're developing them with a patient and their family in mind.
Yes, that's actually true. And it is a little bit different. Oftentimes in the nonprofit sector, we have a lot of dedication and a lot of duplication, not trying to get things done. But we have been very lucky that the FOP community, and that spans patients, caregivers, family members, clinicians, researchers, pharmaceutical companies, and academia, have all worked together to recognize that, we can't do this alone and that we can't split our efforts. And so as a result, there is only one registry, but it is extremely well done. I think I came into the mix after it had all been set up, so I take no credit in that. And what has evolved is that we have 6 years of longitudinal data in patient-reported outcomes. Patients answer questionnaires about every 6 months about their experiences with FOP. There are about 300 individuals with data in the registry, and there is a medical portal that has been launched to capture electronic health records. And altogether, that has created a cachet of real-world evidence that would not have previously been available. And I think that it has been a big attraction for those 6 pharmaceutical companies to enter the FOP space, because now they have information with which to develop clinical endpoints for their trials. They have a means of identifying where the patients are. And they have a means through IFOPA to ask questions of the patient population so that we can ensure that trials can be conducted, that we will successfully have enough patients, and those patients will be able to undergo what is necessary to be in a clinical trial. They do. They have access to this data, not directly, but through the use of reaching out to us and asking us to cull the data. So we have a real world evidence manager on staff who's able to identify the information in there, provide information back. We have a statistician that we work with to make sure any information that goes out from the registry and reaches out to pharma to answer those questions is statistically significant and is appropriate. Those are progressing. Those are ranging from phase 1, healthy human subjects, through phase 3. And that breaks down as we have about 3 of those are in phase 1, and the other 3 are 2 in phase 2 and 1 in phase 3. Yeah, I'd like to answer that a little bit, and then maybe Michelle can chime in a little bit more. So there are 225,000 medical research foundations in the United States, medical research nonprofits. And they together constitute only 5% of the research dollars out there. So very small percentage. But there is an incredibly unique vantage point that nonprofits and advocacy organizations can serve. We speak for the patient population. We don't answer to investors. We don't need to obtain the next grant in academia, if you will. We simply speak for the patient. And the other thing that one of the big things about participating in at Bio is to bring home the message that we do have resources that are incredibly valuable to de-risking some of these programs so that pharmaceutical companies can ultimately be successful. And so we can bring the patient population, the patient perspective unique tools, such as creating a mouse model that is widely accessible to both academia and the pharmaceutical industry, to leveraging our dollars to do more with what we have. As you mentioned earlier, the patient registry. We can act as a convener, and not only convening just patients, but physicians and researchers, that when pharmaceutical companies first enter a space, they may, it may take them longer to find who's who. But we have our finger on the pulse of that at all times.
I think it's also important that we, are providing this go-between between drug developers and academic institutions that are working on advancing programs and the patients, to make sure that the two sides are considering one another's perspectives. But I think it's also really important. One of the activities that we participate in is making the community aware about the drug development process and about the process of clinical studies and trials, so they understand more about what their role is in the process, what their rights are in the process, and what their responsibilities are in the process, so that when they engage in trials, they have a real picture of how that may look for them and how they can participate to help maximize all of the work these great drug developers are doing. So we've developed a series of videos around drug development and clinical trial participation, and they're launched in English, but we're in a place right now where we have 3 trials that are launching, or they're moving to the next phase, and they're now expanding to global sites. So we are partnering with leaders, and most of the leaders are parents or someone living with FOP in another country. We're partnering with them to make sure that they and the communities in that country, maybe it's Malaysia or maybe it's in Chile, that they are aware that these trials are coming, that we have these educational resources translated into their native languages, so that they can understand the messages that are coming to them, and that we can really partner to make sure that there is good diversity in the trial recruitment, and that there is also we're recruiting as many people as possible to fill these trials, because there's about approximately 1,000 diagnosed patients in the world. The incidence of FOP is about 1 in a million. So there should be 7,400 people out there living with FOP. We know that there are about 1,000 diagnosed. But with 1,000 diagnosed people and 6 clinical trials running, that is, you've got to find lots of people that are willing to participate in those trials. So a big piece of our work is just assisting with education and recruitment in the patient community globally.